How's everyone? It's Tuesday. If you're a rosary praying Catholic, that means it's a sorrowful day, sorrowful mysteries of Jesus and his love for us. Today is also the feast day of one of my favorite saints, Saint Jean Vianney. Jean-Marie Vianney, also known as the Cure of Ars, which is French for the priest of Ars, A-R-S. In France, Ars is like a little hick town. It's where a bishop would put a bad priest, meaning a priest who's faithful and traditional minded, someone who needs to be punished by a little bit of isolation. Saint Jean Vianney was born. Well, he died in. He was born in the late 18th century in France. Patriotic Frenchman in a time of amazing, incredible upheaval. French Revolution time, Carmelite nuns and clergy being rounded up, a lot of isms that were destroying the world, materialism, atheism, collectivism, fraternité, égalité. What's the other one? Fraternité, égalité, liberté, that's it. All the slogans of the French Revolution. They were all in the air, and they were causing enormous damage to the integrity of the church. The young Father Vianney was not very good at Latin. His superiors in the seminary were concerned that he couldn't understand the Latin lectures, and he had a very hard time with the theology. And so after he was ordained, with certain restrictions, he would rehearse and over-rehearse and rehearse his homilies. And there's a traditional press called Roman Catholic Books. I don't know if this is in print. I don't even know if traditional Catholic books even exist as a publisher. Roger McCafferty, I think the publisher's name was. It's a collection of homilies from the great Saint Jean Vianney. And if you read these homilies, you realize if this guy gave these homilies in a seminary today, he'd be given the Golden Boot Award, but quick. They're stirring. They are full of verve, passionate, uncompromising, clear, simple, direct. He suffered a lot as a priest. He was misunderstood. He was given a really, really difficult setting, assignment. He was introduced to some Catholic religious laywomen. Her name was Catherine Lessange, Catherine Lessange, and Benedicte Lardet. And together they formed a house for girls called La Providence. They had no money, just strictly divine providence to raise money and to run this thing. And it became a massive, I'll say success, even though Catholics are funny about the word success. That's based on a saying that Mother Teresa never said. Namely, you've probably heard this: God has not called me to be successful. He's called me to be faithful. She never said that. So, miracles began to attend this young priest's life, including the ability to read souls. He had this very similar ability that Padre Pio did, that he could kind of read the state of your soul when you came to confession. And whatever he made up in oratorical, Greek, Latin, intellectual chops, he more than made up as a preacher. In fact, later in life, he was a priest for over 40 years. People would come to the church from all over Europe just to watch this beautiful man preach the gospel. And people would weep because of how in love with Jesus Christ the cure was. I lead pilgrimages around the world, and one of my favorite places is to go to the chapel in Ars, where his incorrupt body still lies. That's right. His body did not decompose after death. He's one of the several hundred Catholic saints whose bodies never decomposed. This is an ongoing miracle of grace. There were a lot of miracles that had to do with food, with housing, with shelter, dire, like really terrible emergencies that God took care of through the agency of this priest. He decided to spend most of his priestly hours in the confessional. This is 11 to 12 hours. In the summer, he upped it. Now, the summer in Ars, it's very, very hot and humid, French countryside. And he upped it to 16 hours in the confessional. So think 8 a.m. until midnight. He slept very, very few hours. And he famously fasted on mostly potatoes and bread with some supplementation of vegetables. He's the patron saint of diocesan priests. Now, there's a whole, I call them intellectuals, INNERLEKSHUL, intellectuals, including seminary professors that are just too smart for the room. All right, I'm gonna take it up where I left off. Even though it's the sun is down, it's still super hot here in Arizona. Just one last little tweak here. Wonderful. Yes, Saint Jean Vianney ran into trouble because of his lack of intellectual prowess. And thanks, swimming upstream. Yeah, the situation in the Archdiocese of Halifax is very, very, it's filled with Protestantization and liturgical abuse, and I wish I could say it was dead. If it was dead, it could be reborn. There's no traditional Latin Mass, absolutely thumbs down. Long story, but I'm glad you're there. I'm glad you like the Nova Scotia accent, whatever of it lingers. So once Saint Jean Vianney put his hand to the plow, that's when miracles began to happen. That's when he increased his hours from 11 to 12 hours per day in the confessional to 16 in the summer hours. And I mentioned earlier his ability to read souls. He shared that in common with Padre Pio. And there's definitely a kind of too cool for the room attitude toward him among certain intellectuals, because he didn't have the output of a St. Augustine or a St. Thomas Aquinas. What he had was a burning love of Jesus Christ for his flock. People would drive from all over Europe to just sit in that church in Ars and sometimes weep because of this saintly man who's like a white hot flame of love for Christ. He was very uncompromising in some ways. He was not a fan of dancing. He was not a fan of like speakeasies. And we're talking about an era of skepticism and atheism around the time of the French Revolution. He died in 1859. So he saw a lot of turmoil in the world around the church. And he didn't want anyone to go to hell. That's the priestly heart of Saint Jean Vianney. And if you go to Ars, or if you ever want to come with us on a pilgrimage, we see with our own eyes his incorrupt body. It's quite a sight. It's right over the altar there. Bishop Strickland celebrated Mass. I can still see him there. Amazing. So this is part 2. Lexicon says, let's be honest, you're genuinely corny. Okay. Well, at least I write and speak under my real name there, Lexicon. Do you want to reveal yourself and come out in the open like the rest of us? How about that? But I'll take corny. Frank Capra was corny. I will also take a 0 alcohol Stella. So we need priests like St. John Vianney. Meat and potato Catholic priests. He's the patron of diocesan priests. And one feature about him is, while he was famous for his miracles and for his soul reading and for his holiness and his generosity, especially to orphans, it took the church a good long time to canonize him. He died on August 4th, which is why this is his feast day. August 4th, 1859. And he was not canonized until 1925 by Pope Pius XI. So there was no rush back then. That's a lot of years for someone whose fama sanctitatis, or the fame of his sanctity, was very, very widely known in the church and the world. And so his feast is celebrated now yesterday. If you went to Mass today, you may have got the transfer date in the Novus Ordo calendar for St. John Vianney. And I think he stands as a cautionary tale and an antidote against indifference. He was against indifference and indifferentism. If you are really attached to material comforts, St. John Vianney is a good patron. Someone who was so committed to fasting, so committed to really a radical life of the imitation of Christ. You might check out that book. I think it's called Sermons of the Cure of Ars. And then there's the famous biography by Monsignor George Rutler. I think it's just called Cure of Ars, something like that, ARS. So enjoy. These are great saints. They're saints for our time. And there's a lot of wisdom behind our Holy Mother, the Church, in selecting him as the patron of diocesan priests. So if you're a diocesan parish Catholic, then thank your pastor for his priesthood. I'll bet you he gets more complaints than compliments. And our priests are workhorses, and they need all the affirmation and love and prayers and home-cooked meals that we can provide for them. So with that, I'm going to say sayonara. Sorry this was broken in two. Word to the wise, phone can overheat if doing it outside. So thanks mucho. Check out the Patrick Coffin Show. It drops every Thursday. And we watch the entire unexpurgated, unfiltered, uncensored version of all my videos, including the podcast, inside at the True North Movement. That is patrickcoffin.media. See you then. In the meantime, like St. John Vianney, be a saint. What else is there?